All right, 49ers update. Welcome in. It is Thursday afternoon, and we do actually have a piece of news for you. We weren't expecting all too much news this week. Now, as the week progresses, 49ers defensive coordinator news should become more and more expected, so we'll keep our eyes out for that. But this morning, Charvarius Ward posted on his Instagram that he actually underwent surgery this morning. Now, this wasn't known to the public until Charvarius Ward made it known to the public. But here's the picture that he posted. He said that surgery was a breeze. The 49ers All-Pro cornerback did not disclose the exact nature of the surgery, but there are some clues in the photo. You can see under the text, surgery was a breeze. It says Vincera Institute. So I looked up Vincera Institute. It's in Philadelphia. It specializes in core muscle treatment, so core muscle injuries. We know that Charvarius Ward was dealing with a foot issue and a groin issue over the course of the season. So it might be that groin issue, core muscle, that was repaired during the surgery. However, I will say that is merely speculation. All we have is Charvarius Ward's post, and this will be something that we'll look further into at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis next week. John Lynch is scheduled to speak to the media on Tuesday. So we'll ask him about Ward. I think that right now it's becoming very much more apparent that the 49ers were playing through some real injuries over the course of the playoffs and the Super Bowl. Eric Armstead played with a torn meniscus. Javon Hargrave played with a torn thumb ligament. Obviously, no Talanoa Hufanga, who'll be coming back from the ACL. He's rehabbing right now. We'll check in on that. George Kittle didn't seem to be fully healthy in the Super Bowl. Then he got hurt his shoulder, right? He had to run into the locker room during overtime for the shoulder injury. So the 49ers have just finished a 20-game season. They've played 3 20-game marathons in a row. That is 60 games in 3 years. There are bound to be some wear and tear injuries by the end of that stretch. So it's really important after just that marathon of a run that they had to, I think, run like a sprint. It's really important to check in on the health statuses to see what exactly they're going to have to do to get their bodies ready for next year. And obviously, Charvarius Ward going under the knife today at the Vincera Institute in Philadelphia. That was one of the things the 49ers will have to do to get themselves physically ready for 2024. So more on that front in a little bit. But speaking of the big-time marathon that the 49ers just ran, for the first time, I had a chance to watch the full highlight reel. I just went on YouTube and I put it on the big screen frame TV that we have here at home. And I just had a chance to watch the highlight reel, the 49ers' best offensive plays in 2023. And a couple things stood out to me because I get so zoomed in on this. And you guys know I love giving perspective and zooming out as much as I can. But I can only do that to a certain extent during the regular season. It's not easy to really be appreciative of the larger flows of the season until after it's done. And that's what I had a chance just by watching this highlight reel, laying down on the couch, watching the highlight reel. And boy, Brock Purdy was awesome throwing deep. I mean, Drew Brees-like accuracy, but on deep passes. We had never seen Brock Purdy or any NFL quarterback deliver the 63.8% completion rate that Brock Purdy dealed on the 20-plus yard throws this past season. Pro Football Focus has been charting that stat for over 20 years, and never before has any quarterback delivered a completion rate higher than Brock Purdy's of 63.8% this season. And when you go back and watch the highlights, it is impressive. He obviously has got that intermediate throw that he tries to feather over the dropping linebacker that he did so well over the course of this season. Probably the most famous example was in Green Bay to Jawan Jennings, where Jennings had to climb the ladder to go get it. That throw has been there for Purdy since the very start, and it appeared on the highlight reel many times this year. But the deep outs, the go balls, the deep posts, that guy, the deep corners too. That stuff, the real bombs downfield, that stuff was just on the money time and time again. Now, obviously, the highlight reel didn't show the misses, but while I watched, I remembered that he missed, I think, 3 times in week 2 against the Rams. That might have been the best thing that ever happened to Brock Purdy over the course of this season. He was frustrated with himself for missing 3 deep shots against the Rams. And then even with those deep shots, those misses on his statistical resume, Brock Purdy still finished with the highest completion percentage in NFL history on record on those 20-plus yard throws. So he was really motivated the very next week, or even just, it was just a few days later, because it was a Thursday night game in week 3 against the Giants. He hit Deebo Samuel on that all-out blitz. I think it was a zero blitz coming from the Giants, and he had Deebo Samuel right near the pylon. Perfect throw. The very deep one to Brandon Aiyuk against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then, I mean, you talk about some of the more mid-range ones that were just as impressive, but the Thanksgiving night game, the post to Brandon Aiyuk that Purdy threw before Aiyuk came out of his break. I mean, it was reminiscent as far as timing goes as the Chris Conley throw against the Packers on the winning drive, as he threw that one before Conley came out of his break on the deep out. So, I mean, it was just a masterful MVP caliber season from Brock Purdy. And, you know, the rapport to Brandon Aiyuk was absolutely sensational. What we saw as far as the ability to just know where Brandon Aiyuk was, and Brandon Aiyuk knew where to go as far as, you know, where Purdy probably would be looking for the ball. So many of those throws to Aiyuk and those connections from Purdy going in that direction were anticipation throws. And watching the highlight reel really made you appreciate how monstrous of a season, how efficient of a season Brandon Aiyuk had. I mean, he had something like 73 or 74 fewer targets than CeeDee Lamb, and almost had as many yards. I mean, it was Brandon Aiyuk was number 7 in NFL receiving yardage, despite having over 60, at least over 60, maybe over 70 fewer targets than the most targeted receiver in CeeDee Lamb. That is efficiency. He led the NFL at 18 yards per catch. The yards per route run, second to only Tyreek Hill. We've seen some of the metrics for Brandon Aiyuk. They're off the charts. It's him and Tyreek Hill in the upper right of all those grading metrics. The 49ers are going to try to re-sign this guy. It's a big deal. They still have him under contract with the 50-year option next season. But when you look at how good Aiyuk was, especially in the context of his tandem with Brock Purdy, your jaw drops. And I think it's worth a rewatch of the highlights to appreciate exactly how it all went down. This is my article from today. And I told you guys yesterday when I started talking about this on the show, examining the 49ers salary cap outlook and how it applies to Brandon Aiyuk's future. I went deep into stuff. I busted out my salary cap sheet on this. I talk about the 2024 salary cap situation and how there are a lot of people peddling nonsense out there. There are a lot of people saying stuff because they think it can make them sound smart on YouTube or on Twitter or wherever, but they're not actually looking at the numbers, and they're not really realizing the differences between 2024 and 2025 as far as contractual obligations and contractual outs. I get into all of that in this article. So if you want to become smarter on what the 49ers are lined up to do, where they're invested over the course of the next 2 years, go ahead and check this one out up on The Athletic. You could probably get it for, I don't know if it's $1 a month right now, but probably a really, really good price. I will go ahead and put this on the chat section for you. There you go. And I back it all up with numbers. The 49ers are in position to retain their core if they would so like to do in 2024. The inflection point is potentially 2025 if that's where Purdy makes his money. Now they can start getting ready for 2025 by jettisoning some salary in 2024. But I mean, even in the case of Brandon Aiyuk, you could actually lower his cap hit this season by paying him now, and then the higher cap hits will come later. Nobody is saying that a trade is impossible. I just think that the 49ers are set up, and, you know, based on the highlights that I just watched, and I watched tape all season. I watched the coaches tape all season, and I think it was clear to me they didn't really slow down this season. Their skill positions were still going strong. I think the 49ers are lined up to run this back and try to run it back with a better offensive line. So anyway, that piece is up there. Go ahead and check that out, and we can move to the rest of the 49ers update. How about the 49ers 2024 opponents? This is fun. We got all of them up here on the screen. Now, this came out at the end of the regular season based on how teams finished in the standings, but there was no time to look at this at the end of the regular season. We could now look at it because it is the off season. But the 49ers away games this next year, obviously traveling to Arizona, traveling to LA, traveling to Seattle. Those are NFC West matchups. They'll be headed to Green Bay for the first time since the Snow Globe game. Then they might be headed to Minnesota, but they also might be headed to London. And by the way, these games are not in order. The schedule is not going to come out for a couple of months. But the Vikings are slated to host one of the 3 London games, the NFL in Europe London games this year. Actually, I think, there are 3 London games and I believe 1 Munich game, 1 game in Germany. The only team that the 49ers face that is currently slated to host a Europe game is the Vikings. So if the 49ers go to Europe next year, it will not be to Germany. It will be to London to face the Minnesota Vikings. If not, they're going to head back to Minneapolis. Trip to Miami on the docket, trip to Buffalo. That's one I'm excited about. I've never been to Buffalo. Be cool to check out, and a trip to Tampa Bay. So 2 separate trips to Florida for the 49ers. I think that they would prefer for both of those trips to be late in the season. You'd rather go to Tampa and Miami in December if you can, because that way you avoid a severe cold weather game and you're in Florida when it's not really hot. The nightmare for the 49ers would be September games against both the Dolphins and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the road. I think that would be very, very draining. As far as the home schedule for the 49ers goes, obviously the usual suspects from the NFC West, Arizona, the Rams, and the Seattle Seahawks. Then you've got the Chicago Bears coming into town. I believe that Chicago, I remember them coming in 2018. I'm trying to think if they've been since. In 2018, the Bears actually had a really good defense and a playoff team, and it was a close game. Nick Mullins ended up not being able to pull it out for the 49ers. Detroit, back to Levi Stadium for the first time since the NFC title game and the big 24-7 comeback from the 49ers. Robert Saleh's New York Jets, and presumably Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets, along with Robert Saleh, coming to the Bay Area and Levi's next year. So are the Patriots, but it will no longer be Bill Belichick's New England Patriots. Then there are the Kansas City Chiefs and the Dallas Cowboys. So the reason I saved Chiefs and Cowboys for last is because in 1994, after the 49ers had lost 2 straight to Dallas in the NFC Championship game, and they really needed to get over that Cowboys hump to win the Super Bowl, you knew they were going to play the Cowboys in the NFC Championship game. That year in 94, they actually hosted Dallas during the regular season. And obviously, we all know that they beat Dallas in the NFC title to head to the Super Bowl and win it. But I think a lot of people forget they also beat Dallas in the regular season at Candlestick. And that was a huge part of the 49ers getting over the psychological hump of beating the Cowboys. I think they've got to get over a similar psychological hump at this point of beating the Chiefs. They obviously blew the lead in Super Bowl 54. They lost in the 2022 season at home at Levi's Stadium, and they lost in Super Bowl 58. So the Chiefs are the new Cowboys for the 49ers. 30 plus years later, San Francisco is trying to leapfrog a team that has caused it plenty of torment. And it's fitting that both Dallas and Kansas City are coming to the Bay Area next year. But I'm most excited to find out if the 49ers are going to London. I think that'd be really cool. And that would be against Minnesota if it does happen. I have an NFL draft thought about interior offensive linemen. Now, this is just a really preliminary thought, but just today I was casually writing about 3 offensive line prospects. There's Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon. There's Graham Barton out of Duke, and there's Zach Frazier out of West Virginia. All these guys are top, higher tier, we'll put it this way, because it's hard to say top tier interior offensive lineman usually goes a little bit lower than the top 10. But so we'll say that these are higher tier interior offensive linemen. All 3 of these guys have potential positional flexibility in the National Football League. All 3 of them, I think, can play guard or center. We'll see at the NFL Combine about some of the metrics, some of what might happen with these players on an athletic testing score moving forward. But the 49ers need a lot of offensive line improvement, and they need it in more than one spot. And it might be best for a short-term, long-term contingency plan to go after some of these players who can play multiple positions. The Green Bay Packers have done a ton of that, and they've built one of the best offensive lines in football on a year-in, year-out basis. And, maybe the 49ers go after some of these very versatile interior linemen to have somebody take over at right guard to begin, but maybe eventually be groomed for the starting center position in the middle of the formation. Will it happen? I don't know. Should it happen? I would say probably. You've got 11 picks, and I do think you do have to invest more in the offensive line than you have been over the past couple of years. The last big offseason of investment up front was 2021 for the 49ers when they gave Trent Williams that record contract. They drafted Aaron Banks, and they signed Alex Mack. I would expect San Francisco to pour a lot of resources again in the front because it is a glaring need for this football team. All right, let's open this up to a little 49ers Q&A. And I need some water. So I think I'm going to put Lombardi will be right back up on the screen just because I am very thirsty. But write your questions while I'm gone getting my water because we need your questions. I think your questions would be really, really helpful. All right, we'll see you in a bit. What is the second highest completion percentage for throws over 20 yards? I think so. Purdy was at 63.8%. I looked this up earlier this year when he was on pace to break the record. I think there was somebody at about 61 or 60, but there were at most there was only one that had eclipsed 60% with a qualifying number of attempts on the season. Here's a really cool stat for you. In most seasons, the NFL leader on deep throws is not over 50%. Throws of over 20 yards in the air are, by just nature, lower percentage throws. So when you look at you're not supposed to be completing 63.8% of your deep throws. It's just not, it's not a, it's not a number that you're supposed to see. And that made this season exceptional for Brock Purdy and the 49ers offense. Is he going to be able to do it again next year? I would say it was probably an outlier season as far as how high it was. I still think he'll be excellent on those throws. I mean, they had everything firing. Now, there is a chance, though, that he could sustain that and maybe even be a little bit better if they can get a better offensive line. Because for some of the really slower developing deep shot plays, obviously that pass protection has to be there. What really impressed me is that Purdy delivered downfield successfully on throws that weren't perfectly protected this year. And this was the really cool part about just watching the self-contained highlight reel. You realize how much of a joke it was that people were doubting Purdy's mobility early in the year. You realize that when, the whole narrative was, oh my God, he shocked us with his mobility in the Detroit Lions game. It was there since week one. And he was running for big first downs against the Steelers, ran for a big first down against the Giants. He was running a lot early in the season. Announcers were even commenting on how fantastic he was scrambling the football. But not only that, Purdy was also buying time with his legs and then uncorking passes downfield from a very early point of the season. And it's something that he obviously continued throughout the course of the whole run. Go for broke. They never watched any of Purdy's college tape. His college tape, there was a lot of frantic franning in the college tape. Frantic Fran Tarkenton. I started covering the 49ers in 2017. Same year as Shanahan and Lynch came aboard. Although I was a little bit later than them. I started at training camp of 2017. Jeff Ulbrich as defensive coordinator. Well, I've talked about it. I think that it would make sense from the standpoint that he's worked with Kyle Shanahan before. He was on the staff with the Atlanta Falcons. He's a fiery guy. I think the 49ers will want to go with a personality like that. You look at the fact that linebackers have been the successful defensive coordinators in this system. Robert Saleh, as far as having the background of coaching linebackers and D'Amico Ryans as well, but he was an all-pro linebacker in his own right. I think they want somebody who's going to tie rush and coverage together. So you've got all those different connections to the current 49ers staff and the current way of thinking that they want from their defensive coordinator. But he also is a 49er as a player. From 2000 to 2009, Jeff Ulbrich played for only one team. He played for the 49ers. So I don't think it'd be a bad hire. Now, but I don't, I'm not privy to a lot of the real nitty gritty schematic X's and O's. And Shanahan is having, I'm sure, these discussions with all candidates. He wants to be talking about the way that any potential defensive coordinator's thoughts are going to meld with what the 49ers are doing, because it didn't work out for them last year. Now, Ulbrich is under Saleh right now, so there's a good chance that that issue will be taken care of just by virtue of the fact that Robert Saleh was the one that initially installed this 49ers defense. It obviously has evolved since, but it also would be a lateral move for Jeff Ulbrich because of that. And the 49ers would need to be granted permission by the Jets for such a lateral move to be executed. So I don't really want to go into the rabbit hole of proclaiming anybody the winner in a defensive coordinator search that's been very, very secretive from the 49ers standpoint. It could end up being a name we've never heard of. It could still end up being Bill Belichick, although we doubt that, obviously. So it's just one of those things where let's just pump the brakes and let's wait to see who the 49ers pick. And then based on that, we can discuss. But I've talked about the prototype. I've talked about the importance of good communication with the linebackers. And we've talked about what's worked and what hasn't in the past over the 7 seasons that Shanahan has been in charge. Tom Randolph asks a good question, and his question ties right into what I wrote today on Brandon Aiyuk and the 49ers salary cap outlook. Now, I am going to open a second page here for you to help answer this question. That second page is almost ready. Here we go. Boom. All right. This is my 49ers salary cap breakdown. So the question is, at what point in the future will the Niners not be able to keep playing the restructuring game and will have to pay the piper? What year? So the restructuring game, for those who aren't familiar, is if you don't have salary cap room, you could find players with large base salaries, and you could convert most of those base salaries to signing bonus. And by rule, the signing bonus is amortized over up to 5 years of the contract. So you could basically take money that's hitting the cap this year and you could spread it out over 5 years to make the cap hit smaller now. But by extension, it makes the cap hits bigger in the future. What the 49ers have been doing, to answer Randolph Tom's question, is they've been adding big contracts every single season, but because the salary cap has gone up every single season, it's tied to league revenues, they've been surfing a wave and they've been able to fit under that cap. So they've surfed the wave thanks to the fact that they've added the new contract every year and they've restructured money to push money back into the future. But since the cap has increased moving into the future, they've been able to fit that restructured money under the limit. Where I speculate that there might be an inflection point is here. These are the 2025 books. So I made 2024 books and now I toggled to 2025. You can see that the 49ers already have $239 million in liabilities in 2025 with only 27 players under contract, and that's before an extension for Brock Purdy. If Brock Purdy gets a massive extension and it has to hit the book starting in 2025, that's the year where I think the 49ers might have to start making some decisions. But even that is not certain, because the analogy I'll use for the salary cap is this. It's like a sink, and you're pouring water out of the faucet into the sink. That's your new expenditures and your new contracts. And you could continue pouring water into the sink because the sink is getting a little bit bigger each year. They're digging around and they're making extra room with the higher salary cap, but you can keep on pouring more water into the sink as long as you're draining enough out of the bottom of it. You could probably pour more than you drain with the cap obviously getting bigger. But at a certain point, you've got to make sure that sink doesn't overflow, because an overflowing sink means you have to make some tough cuts. So the 49ers are paying the salary cap bills that of the restructures every year. They're paying the prorated portion every single season, right? The signing bonus prorates forward into 2025. So they're paying for some of 2023's restructures already in 2024, but they're only paying for like a quarter or a fifth of them. And then the rest of the bill is in 2026 or 2025, then 2026, so on and so forth. So as long as they keep the sink at a steady level, if they push the money out in a fiscally balanced way, they should be able to continue the restructure game. You can't go too aggressive with it. Somebody like the Rams went really aggressive with it. I think somebody like the Saints this year, who are way over the cap, the Dolphins are way over the cap, they might have been a little too aggressive with it. They're at the point where they got to cut guys just to be able to field the roster while also paying so much dead money from restructures. I think they're going to have to cut at least a couple players. Remember the Rams a couple years ago? They had to cut a lot of players because they ran into that kind of cap hell. That's when the sink starts overflowing. Nobody knows exactly when it's going to be because, A, people don't even know the size of the 2024 salary cap yet. The 49ers are hoping for as close to $250 million as possible. And B, we don't know what the Brock Purdy contract is going to look like yet. We don't know other things like Talanoa Hufanga. How is he going to come back from his ACL? Well, he's due for a new contract after this season. So those are all really, really important variables that we need to pay attention to. And right now, it's the best possible guesswork for the 49ers. They believe that they've been operating sustainably with the restructures. Are they correct? We'll see. But if you do look at my mathematical work on some of those charts, I think they're right. I think that they have been operating sustainably, with the big caveat being Purdy's contract in 2025 may force them to make some decisions on other players. The good news for them is they have some outs in that 2025 season to where you can let go or trade players with good financial return for doing so, big cap savings for doing so. They don't have those kind of potential cap savings this year, which leads me to believe that the 49ers are set up to push a lot of the chips into the middle of the table during this cycle. So you look at somebody like Deebo Samuel, $21 million of dead money if you got rid of him this year. You'd only save $6 million. But the savings for Deebo Samuel would increase to $15 million if he left the team in 2025. Javon Hargrave is another example that I put out in this article right here. Javon Hargrave would actually cost the 49ers more money to trade him away than to keep him. It'd be $9 million more expensive to trade him away than keep him this year. But then all of a sudden next season, you could save about $8 or $9 million through such a move. So they're double down, invested into their core this year. And that's totally fine because based on the tape that I've watched, the 49ers were going strong all season long. I mean, especially the star players. You had good performances. It didn't look like they were physically losing a step. Obviously, you had a couple of effort issues on defense. And, people are talking about Deebo Samuel on a few plays away from the football. But I think the 49ers looked reasonably fresh all year long. There were no overt signs of this team aging out. And I think that all indications supported the notion of running it back with this group, trying to bring back the core. You can afford it under the 2024 books. And then, just trying to fortify what you have with a better offensive line. I can give you guys one more look to answer the restructuring question. This is from a guy named Anthony Reinhard, who does a good job making graphics and all that kind of stuff. And he's made a graphic about the salary cap. This is the 49ers potential restructures this year. So who can they theoretically restructure to open up cap space? Anthony points out the 49ers have $98 million total in potential restructures if they need to do so. So if they really want to push all their chips into the middle of the table this season, they can. The 94 49ers did that. They ended up, with the 49ers in 94 to about 98, they kept on restructuring deals, but they ultimately hit cap hell after Steve Young had to step away from the game in 99 and 2000. One could even argue that Steve's final year with the 49ers, the team was already suffering from the negative effects of cap hell. So you can't restructure too much because the sink will flow over at some point. It is just impossible to predict exactly when it will. Aussie, I think the 49ers should pull a page from the Rams this year. Spend, win a Super Bowl, and then get some big help in the draft. You got to get a little bit lucky, obviously, for that to happen. There could be that kind of sense of urgency for the 49ers this year. Just decide to go full pedal to the metal, screw the consequences, and move forward. If you think that you're going to have to strip the team clean outside of Brock Purdy anyway in 2025, then maybe that's something that you consider doing. That being said, I think the 49ers really believe in the sustainability of their roster construction. I don't think that they necessarily want to completely jeopardize their future. They're big into the sustainability aspect of this all. That's been really important to Shanahan and Lynch ever since they joined. At some point, though, you do need to break through. You do need to kick the door down and win the Super Bowl. So I think that the moves the 49ers make this year, at the very least, are going to be needed to be targeted toward beating the Chiefs. You need to improve that offensive line, especially the interior, to take on Chris Jones. I think you absolutely do need to focus on the edge rusher position opposite Nick Bosa to make sure that you're collapsing that pocket on Patrick Mahomes. It's tough because the Chiefs haven't been called in these Super Bowls against the 49ers for any offensive holding penalties. Now, when you stack up on edge rushers, you kind of hope that at least a couple are called. That would be a big factor in swinging the favor toward the 49ers. But I will say that Kansas City, when they were absolutely overwhelmed by edge rushers, by a great defensive front in the Super Bowl 2020 season against Tampa Bay, they did commit holding in that game. Now, Kansas City also had, and they were called for holding too. I think they did commit some holding against the 49ers a couple weeks ago, but they were called for the holding that they committed against Tampa Bay. They lost a lot to a little that season. Shaq Barrett was awesome coming off the edge for the Buccaneers. And maybe the 49ers are going to try to replicate a similar dynamic if they do face the Chiefs again in the big one next season. They do face the Chiefs in the regular season. They're going to be coming to Levi's over 2024. Trent Williams' cap hit is massive this year. Williams' cap hit is, I think, $32 million because they've done some restructuring, and 31.66, and they've deferred some of the money through the amortization of the signing bonus. So to illustrate for you, Trent Williams is right down here. If you need me to zoom in, I can. That's Williams' cap hit. 31.7 million, and you've got the offensive line room as a whole right now making 44 million on the cap for this season. If you want me to do some player interviews, we'll try to get some on during this offseason. That's a good idea. How much money do I think the 49ers can spend in free agency this year, knowing that to pay Purdy in the future? God, these are such tough questions, guys, because I don't even know what the cap is yet. Nobody knows what the cap is going to be in 2024. So let's wait for an official announcement there. Then I could plug it into this. I could plug it into the projection up here, cap size. By the way, the 49ers have 38 million unused carryover from last year. So I'm doing 250 plus 38. But that might be a little bit high. It might not be 250. If it's only 245 plus 38, well, then I could change this to 283. And, all of a sudden the 49ers have less space to play with. If they go aggressive with restructures, though, they can spend very, very freely. The problem is that it might come back to bite them in 2025 and beyond. So it's all about keeping that water level in the sink at a sustainable spot. Logan says, at some point, we've got to ask ourselves, can Kyle Shanahan really win the Super Bowl? I agree, but that point is not right now. I mean, this is a sample size issue. He's been to 2 games. You wouldn't look at a coach that is 0-2 with a good team at the start of the regular season and start questioning his job security. Only really, really bad franchises would do that, but really bad franchises don't end up going to 2 Super Bowls and 4 NFC championships over 5 years. You can lose on any given Sunday to anybody. You can have an especially high chance of losing on any given Sunday to the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. 49ers played them close twice and lost twice. The Dallas Cowboys, again, beat the 49ers twice, NFC Championship in 92 and 93. People wondered if the 49ers would be able to beat Dallas. They got over the hump next season. Beat Dallas midseason, 21-14. Beat Dallas 38-28, NFC Championship game. Won the Super Bowl. Turned around, beat Dallas badly in Texas with their backup quarterback, Elvis Grbac, in 1995. So the 49ers started beating the Cowboys over and over and over again through those 1990s after they were losing earlier in the decade. They just had to get over the hump. So it's about getting over the hump if you're the 49ers. And there should be no doubt in people's minds that Shanahan can do it. The question is, will he do it? And that's what we're tuned in to find out. I mean, you're going to have some luck on your side when the day to play the Chiefs and the big game does come. Four straight NFC title games. Has it been four straight? No, it's been three straight. 21, 22, 23. Four straight if they make it next year. They didn't go to the NFC title game in 2020. All right, guys, this sounds like a good finishing point for the show. Why don't everybody go check out the big 49ers salary cap article? I worked hard on it, and I think it's something that will really help you understand what is going on from the bigger financial perspective. It's right here. I'll even toss this into the description for you. So go check it out. 49ers salary cap outlook and how it applies to Brandon Aiyuk's future. Everybody, thanks for joining, and we will catch up with you very soon. Stay tuned for something special tonight. Hit the alarm bell or whatever you need to, because we've got a nice little surprise coming for you. I'll talk to you soon.